Governor in Maine, if we could get your thoughts on the suspect here in Massachusetts. He had his bail set several times and then lowered. Is that maybe say anything about the system that's in place?
Well, I certainly think it's important for the courts to take a look at that case and determine if, in fact, it should have been handled differently. You may all recall that after the Officer Tarantino shooting in Auburn a couple years ago, we did a quick look at his track record and his criminal background and determined that he had actually assaulted a police officer, had been treated as a misdemeanor, and that was part of the reason why he was still out. So we worked very hard with our colleagues in the legislature to change the law so that assault and battery on a police officer that involves any injury is going to be treated as a felony going forward. And I think the tragedy of this is that an officer was shot and killed, and that's kind of the worst part of all of this. But I think it's really important for the courts to take a look at the process, the information, when it was made available, what it said, and if there are things that we need to do with laws, they need to tell us that, and we'll change them. If there are things they need to do with their administrative procedures, that should happen too. I mean, another good example of where you hope people learn was the Gerald Ramey case. One of the things the courts figured out coming out of that case was that they were not tracking every instance in which somebody ended up in a different court charged with a domestic violence issue as opposed to convicted of something. And that horrible, awful, terrible tragedy resulted in a change in the state's laws with respect to how the courts handle domestic violence cases. So if there are lessons to be learned from this, we want to be a partner in fixing whatever needs to be fixed.
Do you think there needs to be some kind of comprehensive bail reform or some look at this so the judges don't keep doing this?
Well, I think the most important thing on this one is to take a look at the facts of the case and determine if there's anything that needs to happen that's either related to law or administrative procedure. We'll work as quickly as we can with the legislature and the courts to get it done.
And what can you do as governor to make sure that happens?
Well, that stuff is set by statute for the most part. There is discretion, and in this particular case, one of the things I would like to know is, do we need to change the status for a dangerousness hearing, right? Because there are certain circumstances in which people do pursue dangerousness hearings, but they don't do it all the time, obviously. And the question I would have is there something we can do or should do with respect to how we determine dangerousness, how the courts determine dangerousness, that requires a law change, and if it does, we'll work to get it passed.
Do you think the laws need to be changed?
I'd like to ask you about that. I don't know until the courts do some more homework on the specifics of the case.